Hey, and welcome back to your number one source for cozy gaming and design content. I'm Nick, and today we're going to be taking a look at a game marketplace that's doing things a little bit differently than others. One could say they aren't like other game stores, but why? At their core, they're Polish company CD Projekt Red, the developers behind such masterpieces and centers for controversy like the Witcher series and Cyberpunk 2077. Now, regardless of what you think of their games, their backstory is very interesting, and I think compelling. Apparently, back in the day, when Poland was under communist rule, copyright laws were very lax, and as time progressed, even with a turnover in power, that attitude remained. This led to a lot of blatant piracy of movies and games. CDPR was founded originally to distribute legitimate copies of movies and games, with added goodies and localization in the hopes of enticing potential buyers to pick up a legitimate copy instead of the bootlegged one sitting right next to them on the shelves. As digital distribution took over, they pivoted to follow the trend, establishing a daughter company, or subsidiary, under CDPR. This was Good Old Games, which would later become known as GOG. To start with, GOG is a digital game sales and distribution platform, on the surface just like Steam or Epic Games. What differentiates GOG from other more popular platforms is the lack of DRM in the games they sell. DRM, or Digital Rights Management, is essentially code that's included in the game download that checks with whatever servers to make sure that you own the game you downloaded and that you're allowed to play it. From 100 miles up, this makes perfect sense. Of course the developers should be able to make sure their games that they spend so much time and money developing are being played by people who actually paid for them and not those that didn't. That makes perfect sense. The thing is, it's not that simple. While the idea of DRM sounds good and legit, it has far more cons than it does pros, especially from the consumer side of things. Now, arguably, if DRM was totally transparent to the user and you didn't even notice what it was doing, similar to how it works with DVDs and DVD players, it could be argued to be perfectly fine. It ensures the rights holders get their money for their product, and it ensures you get your game and can play it the way that it was intended. The issue, however, lies in the fact that basically no DRM on games is totally transparent to the user. If it's not a splash screen popping up telling you it's phoning home to make sure you're not some kind of dirty pirate, it's working in the background to constantly confirm that you're allowed to play the game. And in doing so, it makes the game run like shit. And if that wasn't enough, it also requires you to be online if you want to play your game. That last restriction is the real issue with DRM. Because it needs to talk to its trusted servers, DRM in games essentially puts a clock on the playability of any game that uses it. Think about if a game like Ice Climbers on the NES had an always online requirement. Being a rather obscure game, there is almost no way Nintendo would bother to keep those authentication servers up in perpetuity. And even if they did and wanted to, if something out of their control happened, like going bankrupt, which happens to massive companies all the time, that game would be unplayable, and the thing you spent your money on is utterly useless and inaccessible to you. The solution most people turn to is to either buy their games physically or piracy. Now, while buying a physical game oftentimes, but notably not always, means you don't have to deal with the always online part, it doesn't absolve you of any performance issues that might be caused by this code being included. And add to that the fact that basically all PC games are simply not offered as physical releases, even from amazing companies like Limited Run Games. And the fact that physical games very much have a limited lifespan due to the nature of physically existing in the world And this really isn't a viable option for buying your games if you don't want to be stuck to one highly proprietary console with a lifespan of maybe 10 years if you're lucky, from one of the 3 companies that wholly own the console space. That then leaves us with the option of piracy. Now, obviously, this is illegal, and I'm obligated to tell you, you shouldn't do it. And even if this isn't illegal where you're from, if you care about the people who make the games that you love to play, this is very much not a good idea, because you're actively working against their ability to make games. However, many people sleep perfectly well at night while reaping the benefits of pirating their games by simply buying a legit copy and then also pirating a cracked copy. A cracked game is a game that someone has essentially opened up and removed the DRM code, and presumably fixed any holes that might have left. The end result is a game that you can play offline, and you never need to worry about whether or not you're going to be able to play whatever game it is that you decided to download. But those of you with even a little bit of cybersecurity acumen will immediately note that the file you downloaded is entirely untrustworthy. You have absolutely no way of knowing what other code that person put into that game that you just downloaded and ran on your PC. You could have any number of malware working away in the background harvesting your information. So aside from the moral reasons you shouldn't pirate your games, it's also just far too dangerous for me to recommend as a real alternative to simply dealing with the limitations and downsides of DRM. And this is all on top of the fact that DRM isn't even effective. People can, will, and do still pirate games, regardless of if DRM is included. Every security measure is surpassable. As long as someone has access to a thing, there are potential security holes that can be exploited. It has been proven time and time again that exerting control over who can and can't access your product doesn't limit piracy, it creates it. People, on the whole, will opt for the easier and better option. And if you make it so much worse to play your game the legit way, of course people are going to opt for the non-legit way. The solution to the problem isn't to crack down, it's to loosen up, and make the legit route more appealing than the alternative. The vast majority of people don't pirate games because they can't afford or don't want to pay. They pirate them because they want to play the game, and when the legit way to play that game makes the experience markedly worse, yeah, it's a no-brainer. And that is the value add that GOG offers its users. It's a consumer-first platform, and that has its ups and downs, like the same 30% cut from all purchases. But for those developers who care more about the user experience more than having complete and utter dominance over their users, this is a very large value add. That is a really difficult question to answer. I would love to say GOG is perfect and everyone should switch over from Steam and just buy and play their games through GOG. But that would be an incredibly simplified and short-sighted recommendation. I personally love GOG's business model and concept, though if you want to play the latest games right away, Steam and Epic certainly have the advantage. And if you want to find a huge range of older games or smaller indie games, again, Steam is a pretty great start. Now, GOG, as the name implies, is great for getting older games, DRM-free, and I'm talking real retro. Unfortunately, GOG suffers from a bit of a consent issue. That is, they can only upload DRM-free games from publishers who authorize them to. Now, that's a great thing if you want to be able to not only trust the platform you're downloading from, but also if you want to make sure the proper people are being compensated for their work. But it also does mean that GOG can only upload games from those few publishers. So things like Nintendo's back catalog are still fully under the boot of Nintendo. And so, as we talked about, if you want to play those games Nintendo is currently not making available, they are forcing your hand into either jailbreaking their consoles and ripping the games yourself, or taking to the high seas, as it were. To be clear, if you want access to permanently owning hundreds of amazing, truly retro games, I don't think you can get much better than GOG. But if you want the latest and greatest games coming out today, it's not going to be a good choice for that. Ultimately, my recommendation would be to employ a mix. For the games you can get on GOG, it's the superior option from my point of view. But for anything else you can't get on there, I wouldn't hold out unless the publisher has explicitly said that they're going to bring their game to GOG, because chances are it's just not in the scope of their development team. So, with all that said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and maybe you learned a bit about a topic you weren't already familiar with. Thank you so much for watching, and no matter which platform you pick, I hope you have a great day, and happy gaming.